All right, well, first of all, thank you all for coming out tonight. This is a great turnout. I'm always excited whenever we do anything in Tariffville. Not that I have favorite sections of Simsbury, but I do like being in Tariffville more than any other. My name is Tom Roy. I'm Director of Public Works, and I'm going to be helping to kind of coordinate tonight's meeting. A couple of key points. This is being videotaped, which is part of the reason why we're using the microphone. It's going to be available in case you want to show friends and family later. It's going to be available on YouTube. You'll be able to see it whenever you can't sleep late at night. Key point to this, as much as I do love Simsbury, and I do care about Tariffville, it's important to remember that Simsbury is a special place because you're all friends and neighbors. There may be some differences of opinion tonight, but everybody's opinion is going to be heard. Everybody who has a chance to ask a question, everybody's question is going to be answered. We have a whole team of professionals up here that are going to answer the hard questions. I will duck every hard question I get tonight. Okay? Wanted to start it off by introducing Wendy McStudis, our town's first selectman. If she could say a few words.
Thanks, Tom. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. This is a long time coming that Tom and his team and the East Coast Greenway and the Capital Region Council of Government has been working hard to connect Bloomfield to Tariffville to Curtis Park to Route 10 and to connect everybody together so that we can bike and walk and get places from here to there. So I want to thank them all, and I want to recognize my fellow selectman Heather Getz, who's here. We've been champions of this effort, and I also want to thank the Board of Selectmen and the town of Simsbury for providing funding and for getting grants for us. And we have made this a priority of our board, so that's why we're here for you. So enjoy the night. I hope we get some good feedback.
Thank you, Wendy. And we are going to be focusing tonight on how we get a trail of some sort that's going to be a multi-purpose trail that's going to be used for walkers, cyclists, joggers, runners, dog walkers, everything. It's meant to be a multi-use trail, just what the term multi-use is meant to be. It's not specifically for bikers or for walkers. It's for everybody. And the main goal that we're going to be focusing on tonight is how do we get from Tariffville proper to where many of you have seen the trail that's currently under construction that's going to get from Tariffville into Bloomfield. How do we connect that piece essentially to the existing trail along Route 10? There is another trail that is going to be constructed. The designs have been, we'll call it 95% complete, that's going to bring the existing trail along 10 to Curtis Park. We can either extend that trail, and we're going to look at lots of options, to connect into Tariffville proper, or our team of design professionals have come up with somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, give or take, different trail alternatives. And they're not done. If somebody comes up with the right answer tonight, they're here to listen. The whole point of tonight is we are starting this process early enough that there have been no final decisions made. And just as we're doing this here in Simsbury, the Capital Region Council of Governments, which is an organization that most all of the towns in the region belong to, is helping to coordinate this. They're the ones who are actually funding this particular piece of the project. They're going to be doing the same thing in Bloomfield and in Hartford. So I'd like to introduce Caitlin Palmer from Capital Region Council of Governments to give a little overview of what they're doing.
Thank you. You haven't even heard me speak yet. All right, so what do we got here? We've got, I think you're going to cover this, Tom, so I'll hand it back to you. But so thank you again. Very excited to be here. My name is Caitlin Palmer. I'm from, as Tom said, the Capital Region Council of Government, or CROGS. And so we do a variety of things at CROG. We do shared services, we do land use planning, economic development, brownfields, you name it. But one of the things that we're obviously here tonight to talk about is the work we do with transportation planning. So it's a big focus for us at CROG. And as Tom indicated, it's, we were involved in getting the funding through DOT to be able to do this study. And we're well positioned to do it also just because, as Tom mentioned, you could do my part. No, it's okay. This involves multiple communities. So it's Simsbury, Bloomfield, Hartford, as well as East Hartford also has a bit of the gap. It's about 12 miles all told, depending on which way this route goes. So we're very excited. The East Coast Greenway has been a huge priority for us in our transportation planning efforts for a number of years. So again, just very excited. And so I'm joined here tonight by, we've got our consultants, we've got VHB, and we've got Tom and Adam, we've got Bruce, and I think they're all going to kind of get up and speak a little bit. So what do we have? Anything else from me? I think that's it. So thank you.
All right.
Back to Tom.
Okay. So Caitlin mentioned East Coast Greenway. I'm sure some of us, maybe show of hands, who have heard of the East Coast Greenway. Okay. There's some important things about the East Coast Greenway. One is, in many cases, by that designation, it brings people to Simsbury. And when people come to Simsbury to ride the East Coast Greenway, they'll come with money to shop. They'll come with money to buy coffee. They'll come with money to go to restaurants. And that's one of the key things that makes this an important project, as well as that increases our ability to get funding. Because as much as we want to build this trail, it's a lot easier to build if we have support, especially financial support from other agencies. So with that, I'd like to introduce Bruce Donalds, who's representing the East Coast Greenway.
Thank you. Thank you. I know a lot of the faces here, as it turns out. I was reminded recently that I'm on my 23rd year building bike trails in the Farmington Valley and elsewhere, New Jersey, New York, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. And it's been nothing but a pleasure, really. There's occasional downs. I recall when the center of Simsbury was finally built after, I believe, 16 years, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, okay, I got a nod there. We can call it 14 years. How's that? Which is actually, I know is correct, but.
People here will argue.
Yeah, I know. But I bring it up because people come to me and say, Bruce, I want to build a bike trail. I say, fantastic. Just set aside the next decade. And they kind of look at me funny, and I say, no, really, I'm actually serious. This trail, as Tom just mentioned, is not just, in planner speak, an active transportation corridor for the region. It is a local amenity. It brings people to town. There is a very real component of economic development involved. And the stated intention of the East Coast Greenway 30 some odd years ago when we started was in fact to be the Appalachian, the urban Appalachian Trail, right? To go through the cities, to connect the population centers, and we've been modestly successful. We're at 35% from Maine to Florida completed. There are a lot of projects going on right now as we speak. In Connecticut, I have 18 projects totaling just a shade under $90 million that are in process right now. And that will bring us to just about 64% complete in the state. So this is a really serious intent of Connecticut DOT, of Connecticut DEEP, and of the COGs, all of the COGs that are involved. And a huge call out to CROG, because this study, I don't know how many of you are aware, but it is 4 towns, but this is $540,000, this study. And it's a big deal for the entire area. And so I just wanted to say, on behalf of the 450 communities that the East Coast Greenway goes through, that we are immensely excited about this. I can't tell you. The connector to Hartford, by the way, this is always called, on little sheets of paper, on cocktail napkins, this was called the Hartford Connector. And it really is. I mean, that's really what it is. We're connecting the capital city, but we're connecting so much more, right? As we all know. So, thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay. Now I'm going to say we got the real meat of the night. We're going to go through all of the alignments that VHB has looked at to date. Won't necessarily go into deep detail on all of them. Some of them at this point may not be feasible, but we want to make sure that it's clear that we've had our team look at a lot of different options. Once we get done that, we're going to open up the floor to questions, and we're going to go through and make sure that we give everybody a chance to ask questions, let us know what you're thinking. And with that, I want to turn it over to Mark Jewell from VHB.
Thank you, Tom. Good evening. My name is Mark Jewell. I'm a senior planner with VHB, headquartered in our Weathersfield, Connecticut office. Tonight, I've got a lot to go through with you. And first, I want to just go over the project goals. I'm not used to using a mic because I'm used to projecting with 3 little children. So, but to go through the goals very quickly. Look, as you've heard already, it's a regional priority. It needs to be off-road. That's the goal. It needs to connect to local amenities, parks, schools, businesses. We want it to be well-designed and attractive so people will use it. And we got to be good stewards of not only the environment, but the public funds as well. So those are the primary goals. I want to get right into it. This is a quick overview. Most of you are probably familiar with the construction that's going on right now. That's slated to probably be done around Labor Day. But they are going to take a break in April. But I want to get into the status. Down here, Bloomfield Greenway starts at Day Hill Road. A lot of you have probably been there, used it. Yep, great. So everyone knows that trail comes up, crosses Doncaster Road, goes by Old St. Andrew's Church, comes out at 189, where this construction then begins. And so that gets us to Main Street here. Then over here, obviously, is the existing Farmington Canal Heritage Trail. So what are we trying to do? Obviously, we're trying to get from point A to point B. Next slide. So again, this is just another view of it on an aerial. But there at the Circle B is where that construction project will end, and trying to get from B to A or A to B. So here we are. We have several alignments to go over tonight. So bear with me. I know it's a bit of a spaghetti here, but I want to go over them with some level of detail so folks can jot down any questions you might have for the end here. Again, Tariffville Park. This is the school that we're at right now. And the project, Main Street right here where the green line ends, is where we're starting off. So the first option I want to talk about is the yellow line. It travels from that location. If you know that intersection, there's a 1.6 acre parcel of DOT property right by the bridge. It's intended for the trail to go on that property at the top of the slope that slopes down to the river, behind those few businesses towards Main Street Extension, heading towards Tariffville Park entrance. As it goes to the Tariffville Park entrance, right, if you know that park, where the gate is, that's where the old railroad berm is. At that point, it would take a hard right, go over a new bridge on the existing piers in the river, then cross over Old Hartford Pike, cross 189 at grade. So we're talking a first structure here, second structure there, at grade crossing here. At this point, we have to leave the railroad bed, the historic railroad bed, because of the subdivision that was constructed on top of it. And we skirt that subdivision across State Highway 540, back onto the rail bed a little bit, up to Holcomb Road, down the side of Holcomb Road to the side of Floydville Road, and then up to the existing trail here. That also involves a new bridge structure here where Floydville Road crosses the river. So that's just a quick summary of that option one. Now we're going to jump to two. If you want to, Dan, jump ahead. So this option was ruled out for a lot of the reasons we just discussed. Significant structures, it's the longest alignment. It starts to leave Tariffville. And the topography and some of the right-of-way impacts are so. For those reasons, this alignment was sort of discounted. So the next alignment was 2, and what we call 1A, excuse me, which is simply going up 189, straight up 189 to Floydville Road, and then down Floydville Road again, also ruled out. For similar reasons, narrowness on the bridge, bridge structure over the river, long route. Next slide, please. So 2A goes through the park. Folks who know the park, the maintenance road, and the trail along the river, that alignment is a little, we call it 2A because 2 is over here. And this little bit in the pink is ruled out primarily for environmental reasons, floodway, floodplain, wetland impacts. Next slide. 3B. This is part of the third alignment, which we'll talk about in a minute, but this involves the red lines here. And again, those were discounted primarily for the same reasons as up there in Tariffville Park. Boardwalk structures in the floodway, floodplain, environmental impacts, FEMA floodway, wetland impacts, etc. Next slide. Okay, this alignment, 4A. This is an alignment which is sort of circuitous, but I just want to explain what it was and what we looked at. Again, starting at the same spot and going down to Main Street Extension to the entrance of Tariffville Park, and then taking a left on the railroad bed or the railroad berm, and then coming up this public right-of-way to the elementary school where we're at now. Popping out onto Winthrop Street, going down Church, to a little jog on Elm, and then through what would have been the Willow Arms apartment complex, right on the edge of their property. Would have brought you back here onto town property behind all these homes on Hayes, which gets you down to here. And then we had two options to get down. Now there's a 100-foot vertical difference between right here and the Quarry Road. Very challenging to make it ADA accessible. But we looked at two options, the power line right away and then the town of Simsbury property down here. But for obvious reasons, this was discounted. But the part of it that we did like, we think is important, is this connection to the school. We think that's a key component. So what are we left with? We're left with 2, 3A, and 3. So those are the ones I really want to focus on tonight, and happy to take questions about all the other ones as well, but these are what are left on the table, if you will. And you can see that we left this connection to the school. So I'm going to talk about alignment 2 or alternative 2 real quick. Again, starting at Main Street. Again, my apologies. It's probably the babysitter. So, again, going through that 1.6 acre parcel of DOT property behind the businesses, and then I should mention on that Main Street extension, the road's too narrow to accommodate an off-road multi-use trail. So for that, I should have mentioned this previously, but for that short stretch, call it 1 block, pedestrians would have to be accommodated with a sidewalk, and bicyclists would have to be accommodated with on-road markings for that short stretch until you get to the entrance of Tariffville Park. That's the only non-off-road portion of these alignments. I want to make that clear. So 3 and 2 are coincident here, but when you get to the park, you get on the rail bed and you stay on the rail bed. You cross the river on a new structure, a location of the historical railroad structure, and stay on the old railroad bed, and then connect to the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail over here, which for those who know that area, that's near the new Big Y. That's alternative 2. That structure, that proposed structure, is roughly 600 feet across. So then 3 and 3A just have minor differences. They're the same up here until they get to here. And then 3A goes through Whitewater Turn, through the public right-of-way here, onto Whitewater Turn, and then Wood Duck Lane, out to 315. 3 stays along the railroad berm and goes behind, tight to the riverbank, until they rejoin here. And then they're both identical the rest of the way to Curtis Park. Next slide. This is a 1934 aerial of that bridge crossing. 2019 on the right, 1934 on the left. You can see the historical train bridge there. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like when you cross the river. That's the old railroad bed. Next slide, please. And that's what it could look like someday. Again, so that was 2. Now getting back to 3. Next slide, please. So this is down at Curtis Park, down by the soccer fields. So the concept here is to realign slightly Route 315 at the curve. If you know the intersection of 315 and Quarry Road, that's a tight curve. We want to draw it out. Quarry Road would still tee into 315, but we want to draw it out and create a situation where we create enough room for the trail to go on the riverside between 315 and the river. So next slide, please. So this is just a concept change. We want to shift the road over and get the trail in here. Next slide. Somewhat like this. So Quarry Road would be realigned, 315, and this is just conceptual, trying to avoid impacting any soccer fields. Yet getting the space right here on the tight curve to be able to make room for that trail. And that's the same of 3 or 3A. Next slide, please. Now, zooming in a little bit, this is where 3A and 3 are the same, and this is where they diverge. Again, I mentioned this, coming out to Whitewater Turn. The concept is to have this on what would be the west side of Whitewater Turn and the west side of Wood Duck Lane, all the way to where that closed gate is, if folks know that area, at 315. And then once it reaches 315, it would just be a side path along 315 until it ties back in to alternative 3. And then they're the same all the way down to the curve at Quarry Road back to Curtis Park. Next slide, please. This is a shot of the alignment here where it's really tight going between the river and the existing residential property. This is just one concept of how that might look. Next slide. So those are the alternatives. Next steps. Once we gather all the feedback, the alignments that move forward are going to go through an alternatives analysis. This is, the analysis is going to be guided by the steering committee and the advisory committee for this study. And it'll go through a similar process like this. What you're looking at is the process that we used in Plainville. Some of you might have participated in the Plainville, New Britain gap closure study that was done a few years ago. And this is the criteria that they used to rank and select alignments. And you can see those criteria there: off-road, safety, connectivity, security, right-of-way, environmental, and cost. And those factors will be determined and weighted with the help of the advisory committee for this study. Next slide. After that, there'll be a final report. There'll be a draft report and ultimately a final report, and we'll have some concepts, some recommendations here, similar to these types of deliverable products here. I want to spend just a second on this one. For those who might not be here tonight or watching at home, it's very important to get all the public engagement we can and all the public comments we can. There is a project website. It's a bit of a long address. You can scan the QR code, but this is an important website. It's very robust. There's an interactive map on this website that you can zoom in and out and leave comments and make markups and everything. So please go to this when you can't sleep and you're thinking about this. Yeah, this is where you want to go. So please, and hopefully the town, if they don't have this on their website, that'll be on their website soon. So I really want to drive everyone there because that's an important site. Next slide. And if, Tom, would you have final some comments before we open up for questions? But that's all I have for right now, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, first, I think, great job, Mark. That was a lot of alternatives. Mark didn't show you the other 40 or 50 that didn't even make it this far, that were crumpled up and thrown away in the corner. But it was a lot of work, and I again really commend them for the work they did in looking at every possible alternative. With that being said, for those of you who live here, you may have a different version, you may have a different idea. So, like I said, everybody's going to get a chance, but if you have a question, you want to raise your hand. Oh my goodness! First up, just like quick draw.
I've lived on Wood Duck for 25 years. I've lived on Wood Duck for 25 years, and I would just like some clarity. Are you talking about the bike path being 20 feet off my back porch?
I know we're trying to use a microphone, but I can just speak up.
Yep.
If you're talking about the graphic next to the river, yes, that is a very tight spot, and that would be very close to the residential property if that was ever to come to.
Like in my house, practically.
Yeah, that's very tight.
Just getting that clear.
Use the microphone as much as you can for
Fine.
replay, because I can't hear unless you use the microphone.
No, we got you.
Howdy, I have one question, and that is, you did not discuss parking areas. Where are there going to be parking areas along this stretch of trail?
Great question.
Great question. Thank you. The question was about parking areas. Right now, the feeling was that parking would be accommodated at the existing parking at Curtis Park and then at Tariffville Park. Those are the two primary areas, and we'd have to discuss the hours with the gate closure at Tariffville Park, but generally it's a dawn to dusk facility. But those are the only two. We weren't proposing any new parking lots primarily because of the sensitive area and the difficulty where we can find permittable space.
And just a follow-up comment, as I recall, Fairfield Park isn't designed as a parking lot. So I presume the town would have to, in some way, reconfigure the park itself.
Yeah, I think I can help you with that in terms of parking in Tariffville. There is actually a lot of work being planned for Tariffville right now. We are actually hoping at this point to be in construction with some new pickleball courts. That's been delayed for some environmental reasons. We're looking to have that done next year. One of the concepts that's been thrown out is to put a larger parking area near where the current tennis courts are that would service both the pickleball courts, and that additional parking would allow for more trail access. And ultimately, I think it would be in the town's best interest to limit vehicular access down to the far end and have the kayak launch closer to the main park. Because as we all know, there's young kids and rope swings and kids changing oil and all kinds of crazy behavior going on way out at the far end of the park. So, next question. Coming around.
Hi, my name is Mackenzie, and I also live on Wood Duck Lane, and I think this is going to be a common theme for you tonight. So, you really emphasized on 3 and 3A, touching a little bit on 2, but if I'm not wrong from your graph, they all seem to be impacting the Governor's Bridge condo in one way or another, correct? Okay, so my question being is that, my fellow neighbor here, Jeannie, she is a few doors down from me, and we have some beautiful access to wildlife and river views and just an amazing backyard, part of the reason why we decided to buy our condo, and to be honest with you, paid a premium price to live in Tariffville. And so, I was standing outside getting ready for this meeting today, looking out on my back deck, and there is not a lot of room, as you mentioned. It's very, very tight. And one thing I'd like to also mention to the people in here is that it drops off a significant amount from our backyard into that river. I'm talking 5-6 feet. So what I can only imagine we would need to do is not only come into that hill, which would be taking down wildlife, environmental impact, as you've mentioned, the view and things like that. But how far would you guys need to be pushing into that hill in order to make this plausible to go behind for 2 and 3? And yes, and to another point, I'm sorry this is long-winded, but this is a very major concern for our community. Obviously, you're talking about environmental impact on all these alternate plans, but as people who live there, breathe there, have their breakfast, I'm sure a lot of you, I work from home, I enjoy the wildlife, the birds, the turkeys. This is something really serious, and not only the traffic that's going to come through, but the impact that it's going to have to not only our backyard, but the environment around us.
So a lot there. Do you want to respond back to that, Mark, or is it just going to be?
Yeah. Thank you for your question. All good comments. The short answer is that we don't have most of the answers to the questions you just raised. Obviously, as a planning study, we don't have survey yet. We don't know how close or where the property lines are. We don't know what type of design would go into it in terms of a structure. Would it be on piles? Would it be supported so that you wouldn't have to cut into the embankment, or would it be benched into the embankment? All those details are worked out in the design process. So that's a few steps further along than the planning study, just trying to come up with a conceptual alignment. So I wish I had more detailed answers of exactly that. But the number of trees coming down, all those really, really detailed questions, we're not going to have answers to those. Well, what's driving a lot of it is that 315 is to try to stay along like the shoulder of a road. That's nearly from an engineering perspective, virtually impossible. We're talking about, if you tried to do that, you're talking about removing every utility pole and taking people's front yards and right up to their front steps, kind of thing in the cemetery, et cetera. So those are really, really not ideal or really practical or feasible. So we're really trying to narrow things down to what would be practical and feasible and buildable. But again, I appreciate the comment, and it's going to be noted and it's going to be taken into consideration. Tom.
I too live at Governor's Bridge, Beth Tolan, 11 Tanager. I've been at all the meetings regarding these topics for a number of years now. And it's interesting to me that Alternative 3A would come up to put people, in a known community, to put people right on the public streets like that. I've commented on this several other times before. That feels like a real invasion of our privacy in the community, which, as you know, has been built for, well over 25 or 30 years now. So that alternative is the one that I would say I would be very disappointed. I'd like to understand more about why that would be an alternative to, at least keeping it in this railroad path. What drove 3A to come to discussion?
Thank you. Again, the quick answer is it's a public street. That's the easiest answer. We tried to minimize impacts to private property to the greatest extent feasible, and those streets are public streets, and that's really what drove that.
Let me see if I can just add a little to Mark's comment there. It is a public street, and I think like all things, all of these projects, the same as when we do sidewalk projects, they're always difficult. There's never an easy answer that's not going to have a negative impact on some home. And the reason that we're here and we're so early in the process with this is so Mark and the rest of the design team can listen. So they can hear what the concerns are, and they can do their best to understand and see if we can react in a way that's a little bit more sensitive to them. But there's always going to be some negatives to any design. Again, Mark looked at a lot of these designs. We didn't find one that stood out as, oh, there's the answer. Nothing was that shining star. And I would hope at this point, Mark and the others have heard that there is certainly some concerns from Governor's Bridge and privacy and river access, environment. Everything is, I'd say, Mark, I don't want to speak for you, but you've heard that now. We've acknowledged it. And certainly that's going to be part of our takeaway from tonight's activity. Okay. Oh, back here.
Thanks. Good evening. Brendan Mahoney, Tungus Road in Tariffville. I think I'm happy to see two. I was hoping somebody would bring up the idea of a bridge because it seemed kind of while probably more expensive, a good idea. But anyway, my question though is, I attended a meeting like this about 8 2015, 8 years ago. Very similar to this, similar map, et cetera.
Third meeting in 13 years.
Well, yeah, so my question I didn't attend the one 13 years ago, sorry, is, and I don't know who the proper respondent would be, is what is the feasibility of this ever happening? I mean, we've voted on a couple bonds and we've got some plans, but now we're sort of still looking at plans, and I guess I just want to understand, like, is this a reality or is this another kind of fun meeting with maps?
Well, I told you early on I was going to duck all the hard questions, and now as I walk up to the front, somebody up there is getting nervous, and they don't even know who's it going to be. Mark, you can sit down. You took the last hit to the chin. Bruce Donald.
It's actually a good question. Two things come to mind immediately. The first one is that in the last 7 years or so, Connecticut DOT has expressed an interest in completing the East Coast Greenway in Connecticut as the spine trail of Connecticut. And so they've been pouring money into it to such an extent that, they really do want to get the remaining gaps done. So that's the first part of the puzzle, is they're actually spending a great deal of money, on this project. And I don't mean this project, the whole project. And then the other part of the puzzle is it's a strange time for building trails right now, because there's a tremendous amount of federal money in the system that's jockeying around trying to find a place to be spent. And so my quick answer, because I could talk about this for hours, and Tom's eyes are always rolling right now. But the quick answer is it's a time, I think, where the stars are aligned, where I think we can actually get this built.
Mention IIJA.
Well, IIJA, passed in Congress last year, provided an immense amount of money for Connecticut that is structured so that they can spend the money for things like this, for instance. Yeah, you know what and I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I know exactly what you're talking about. That was Let's Go Connecticut, which was $10 million a year, and that went essentially to the easy pieces. I hate to say it, but it's true. The former rail corridors that were abandoned, that were easy to build, that's where that money went. Yeah.
And I think to that point, in many ways, the easy projects have been built.
Well, I think that's right, actually.
And this is not easy, and this, especially along the river and being in the river environment. So,
hello, Wayne Costi. I live on Whitewater Turn, and I want to point out that alternative 3 is, if it goes along the berm, I cannot spit onto it. I can drool onto it. So I'm pretty close, and I'm actually surprised that going along the berm is one of the options for a number of reasons. One of which, it goes through some condominiums. What's left, if you actually go along the rail, goes through a few houses. I don't think that's so. I think it's going to have to get relocated. I also want for the Wood Duck residents that on item 3, if you notice where it diverges with alternative 2, you're below there, and if it goes on 3, it does go right behind your house. If it goes on alternative 2, it doesn't. And the only one that would be impacted, I think, is basically me. I just wanted to kind of point out a couple of those things. And I want to ask about the alternative 2, the feasibility of building a bridge there, and kind of what the issues would be. I guess that's the key question on that one.
well, first, Wayne, you painted a picture. Drool on, that's close.
I was going to prefer hand me a beer, but okay. Thank you, Wayne. The feasibility of a bridge it's feasible. There used to be one there. It's two sections. It's multiple sections, but there's 2 styles. The initial was the end on the condo association side is founded on an abutment, and then a pier. And then the second section, once you're across the main channel of the river, was wood pile supported. The rail structure was a wood pile supported for another 100, 150 feet before it landed on an abutment on the far side, on the Route 10 side. So yeah, it's feasible, yeah. And the elevation is such that you're out of the floodway and the floodplain. It would be permittable.
Interesting. Early in my civil engineering career, I worked on railroad bridges. So I will say it is feasible. The other thing is, other than the cost, it would become a stunning feature, which would bring people to this section of trail as opposed to just being a section of trail that would get you from point A to point B. We've got a lot of runs to the back. We're going to go up here from Robert.
Thank you. You're going to get a lot of people from Governor's Bridge on this. Yeah. I have a couple of concerns. One, and I agree with the privacy of the residents. But, besides that, I really like to see it go down 189 and down Walkout Road and connect. But I know it seems like it's going to be a long way for people. You've got a roadway there. Fine. It's got to go through Tariffville. I know my wife is all for it. And I myself have ridden down Tariffville Road on my bicycle. It's a death trap. So, yeah. Personally, if it's going to go through, I would not want to see that floodplain ripped out. That's a beautiful location. Right now it's flooded. We even have a bad winter. It's already flooded back there. If it's going to go, I'd rather we have an existing road right down through the center of the condo. I prefer just take it right through there and to where that gate is, right on the 315. That would be my preference, being a Governor's Bridge resident. I would hate to see that woodland ripped out. I think most of us look back there. This guy that can spit on it. I'm not that far from him, Drool. I think it'd be a shame. You're ripping on an environment that really I don't think is necessary. And actually, cost-wise, you've already got the pavement right there.
All right, thank you. I saw some deep in the back. We're going to go deep in the back this time. Spend a lot of time up front. Back to the cheap seats. Do you have a question there? No? I'll take it. All right. All the way to the back.
Hi, I'm from the Farmington River Watershed Association. My name is Amy Petrus. And what I'd like to say is I really do think you need to add back in option 1, because I think that's a really important connection. If you could go back to those slides. Because there's already, it's very flat, it's open. And, Steve Mitchell pointed out that there's a lot of federal funding available for these kind of projects, and that would be a really fast, easy, flat location that wouldn't impact any small communities with that connection there. And then you could fix the bridge there too with this federal funding that's for infrastructure and roads. This is a really great option, is option number 1. So I guess it's a straight shot on a bike. Isn't that what you want for a bike trail? I saw a lot of pictures of trails that are very wide with not a lot of trees on it. And when I drive by along the river on 315, all I see are trees. I know there are amphibians in there. I know there are animals in there. I know it's a very sensitive area. And you're trying to put all these lines in here. And I've walked this trail with Tom here many times in poison ivy, in
Winter,
snow.
summer, and fall.
Yes, we have done it all. And I still just don't see how this trail could actually make it here. And there is an opportunity here for federal funding, lots of federal funding for infrastructure to make a really nice trail that connects up there.
Is there anything you want to? Okay. You want to stay in the back here, Diana?
No, I think we can all empathize with the people concerned about it encroaching in their personal property. I know I would be too. And when I look at something like this, I like to look at the big picture. And these are multi-use trails, not just bicycle trails, so they're really for everybody. But I think what might help, Bruce said yes, they want to finish the East Coast Greenway, but what is the importance of these trails and what is the value to the community? If somebody could give, it may be an open-ended question, but if somebody could sort of answer that question a little bit, maybe it would be helpful.
Way up front. I don't know, Bruce, if you want to take a shot at that, or Mark, you want to talk about the impact overall to the community by having trails and a trail network and what that does for recreation and.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting picked on here. It's okay. There's health considerations. I think one of the issues when you look at access to the river or being close to the river is in fact access. To be able to see it and be there. I would also add that in the process of design, because don't forget we're not talking about a design yet. We're talking about an idea of where it might go. In the process of design, you've got an enormous amount of hoops to go through in the permitting process. You've got the Army Corps of Engineers, you've got inland wetlands, you've got a whole host of people, essentially, that you've got to bring to your side before they would agree to the design itself. So I think the environmental issues, quote unquote, going through with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and all of those other hoops, I think in many cases would mitigate a lot of those questions, or in fact rule it out, right? I mean, it might not get through the permitting process, but we don't really know that yet. So that's one part of the puzzle. The other part of it is, like I started to talk about, is actually access to the river and being able to get there and see it and walk your dog and do those types of things. So, and in terms of community building, I mean, it's enormous, obviously. I mean, I think that bringing people through Tariffville and Tariffville residents being able to go elsewhere, with their feet or on a bicycle, I think is important.
And I'll just add briefly to more to the point of the question is, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want to suggest that people go and check out some websites like the Rails to Trails Conservancy and American Trails. Those two organizations, they have a lot of peer-reviewed data and journal articles on the benefits of trails and greenways and communities. And one thing I didn't mention is that in my day-to-day job, I represent Connecticut DOT for all trails statewide. So I do have a unique perspective, and I can say that we're getting funding from the CDC for trails. So there's a health component, the obesity epidemic, sort of initiated things. And so there are a lot of federal agencies who value this and communities that value it. Now DOT has gone to some towns, for example, and they don't want it. And DOT says, fine, we're not going to force you to have it. This is a voluntary kind of thing. But those two websites will give you a lot of information on big picture value.
Wendy, did you want to add something to that?
So Heather and I are here, both on the Board of Selectmen, and we've had the pleasure to have that walk with our host, John Nagy here. A couple things that I see, and I'm sure Heather would agree with me, is if we take the trail all the way through Granby and East Granby, there's no focus on the center of Tariffville anymore, which we feel is important to have that happen. We're working on a potential charrette or plan for economic development in the center of town. We've invested and supported improvements to the Tariffville Park, which are good for the community. So to try to work this through the community itself, and if it's a walking trail, nobody's going to want to walk all the way up through Granby to come back down. The beauty of it, in my opinion, and I understand the river issues and the housing issues, is to bring it through the community and end up in the community for that everybody can use it in the best way that they possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're going to go deep back one more, then I'll come over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm wondering, you said that a bunch of options were considered and rejected out of hand because they came down through Tariffville Park and required walkways over near the river. And I've seen lots and lots of bike paths and multi-use trails that are precisely on walkways and on boardwalks through environmentally sensitive areas. So, you know, Nova Scotia comes to mind. And I know they've done it well, and they've done it over in Collinsville even. So I'm wondering, why were those rejected? Was it simply other advocacy groups were pushing back too hard, or was it was the cost too exorbitant? Because I think that's something that we should consider. You know, there are a lot of people whose homes will be affected, and if we can do this in a way that is the least environmentally impacting, but also sensitive to the needs and desires of the residents, I'd like to really see what that kind of option was.
Mark, is that something you want to reply back to, or are we going to call that just general input for what you're doing?
I guess it wasn't terribly clear, but I think it was that there were some options that were considered up by Tariffville Park, having boardwalks or something, and maybe even crossing the river up there and then coming back down. I'm sorry, but were they rejected because? Primarily cost and right-of-way, cost and environmental. But do we know that the environmental impacts couldn't be mitigated like the other towns, like places like Nova Scotia and North Carolina have done? Or is it just too costly to figure that out?
Is that the floodway, Mark? I'm going to walk up while you think about it. Floodway? I'm giving you a hint. I think it's floodway.
Yeah. So I don't want to give a hydraulic and drainage lesson, but there's things called the floodway and the floodplain. The floodplain, you can do some things in. It's difficult to permit, but you can mitigate and various strategies. The floodway is almost like a no-touch zone. You can do stuff in the floodway, but it's going to be very difficult, and the penalty for mitigation is extreme. And what it happens is if you put any object, even if it's a pile, for example, a 10-inch diameter pile in the floodway, that technically is 0.001 inches of increased water level upstream somewhere, and they make you fix that. And so anything you put in the water, even if the structure is high and it's on a big, tall, 20-foot tall stilt situation, those piles are in the river in the floodway, you have to mitigate the total combined surface area that you displaced. And it gets very complicated and very difficult. And so essentially we try to avoid the floodway at all costs. But putting boardwalk in a floodway or even a floodplain, even if it was everyone's dream, is very difficult. The first flood that comes along and your structure's gone, and now you're starting over if you're lucky. So it's real challenging. Not impossible, very, very challenging.
Okay. There's not going to be a quiz on this, but floodplain is the area that gets wet. Floodway, think of it as the highway. That's where the water is flowing. Mark, these guys, this is Simsbury. Bring it up a little for these guys. They can understand. Who's that? Who? She's advocating for you.
Okay. David Vania, born and raised here in Tariffville, started in 1944. So I love this town and what the Tariffville Village Association sitting at this table has done. I just have to give them hand. That's it. So my question, how many homes on number 3 would be affected?
120.
Oh, they go right on your land? Okay. I have some more questions to go to here.
Yeah, we're back to you. So again, I caveat this statement with survey hasn't been done. But with that said, almost every one of these alignments have either 2 or 3 private property impacts where an easement would be needed from, and obviously that's Governor's Bridge Association in most cases, and then in alternative 2, it's over here. And then at the curve with 315, There's probably 2 easements needed here from the 2 homes on the corner, on the curve. But that's the extent of conceptually, those are the extent of the right-of-way impacts.
How about the path, if 3 is done to Tariffville School, where students, because now, I don't know, have you ever been to Windsor and next to Bart's? Okay, they have a wonderful path. The schools use that all the time. It's wonderful. So if students could leave Tariffville School and go down to the river and walk up and down and learn from that, what a wonderful, wonderful way for the education needed. Okay, let's see. I want to make sure I got the flood place up at Tariffville School past the Governor's Bridge. How many? Yes, I've asked all my questions.
Okay. Important life lesson for me is I grew up in Windsor, and fishing from Bart's was a place to be. Okay. Oh.
I'm almost as old as Dave. So I grew up in Simsbury too. And I've lived over on Horseshoe Circle. We had bike paths were built into our community when they built it. So for those on Wood Duck, you're losing something by not having bike paths in your community. But school children really benefit by going to school on a bicycle to get rid of their stress in the morning. And I go, you see me down on 315 every morning about 6:15, fighting traffic to get over to Westminster School to swim. I've been doing that since August of 2020. So I have watched several vehicles come off the curb. I love what you're doing with Quarry Road. That should be done really immediately. I'm really happy. In 2015, I went to the DOT. They did not have anybody in charge. They were authorizing all the bike paths and nobody knew what was going on. So I assume that role has been filled now by you? Is that correct? We need a commissioner of the bike paths that has all the GPS maps. We don't have that I saw in 2015. So one for the kids, 2 my own grandchildren are in Seattle, Colorado, and Chapel Hill. They just have bike paths right to the sports center like Simsbury Farms. No big deal. They can get on a bike and go. And the speed on 315 has to be reduced to 25 miles per hour. I've seen more people on that lower curve. I see semis and box trucks and landscape trucks. And I just pull to the little aprons that you've created on the side. I try to let the big guys pass in the morning. And then the speed on 10, now I'm going from Crestwood in the development over to Westminster School. So I'm going 315 to 10202, and I have to go across to get over to Westminster School at that light and be sure that I don't get hit with someone doing a fast left turn. So thank you for the stopper there. And so those speeds have to be, it's more the speeding on 10202 and 315 that could be corrected now. We don't have to wait for that. And I really, really need to emphasize that, okay?
I like that you promoted Mark to Commissioner of Trails at DOT. I like it.
We really need that. It was not available, but with GPS, my daughter does all maps and extra stuff. So you can do it easy. It's not that hard.
You didn't answer my question. Going to Tariffville School down to the river. What was that like? What was the path like?
Oh, okay. So the question, we'll just repeat the question, was how do we get from Tariffville School, what the path is going to look like down to the trail?
So if folks know the yard right here, we look out the window and you see the chain link fence right here. There's an opening in the chain link fence right there where kids can go through. That is public open space, town of Simsbury. It goes all the way down, that blue line. It goes right down to the railroad berm right there. And that open space, if you go out here through that gate and go that way, it's public open space all the way to Winthrop Street. So that's from the railroad berm up to the school, down the gate that we just looked at here, right out to Winthrop Street. That's all public property.
So they could get down to the river easy.
Yeah, there is an elevation difference, but at quick glance, looking at the topography, it looks like we can meet the 5% ADA requirement. Easily, yep.
Okay. Coming by. This guy's had his arm up for so long, he's losing blood.
My arm's falling off. My name is Dennis Quinn. I'm an environmental scientist here in the state of Connecticut. I own Quinn Ecological. My specialty is herpetology here in the Connecticut and the New England region. There's been a lot of talk about the environmental issues, and I think my questions might be a little bit premature because I don't think you've done much in the way of any sort of environmental impact statements as of yet. Is that correct? Or okay, so those will be happening. I guess I will bring up the concern that, from sitting here tonight, I've gathered that this project has now been occurring and being for 13 years now. It's been supported by the DOT for the past 7 years extensively with extensive amounts of funding. Upwards of $540,000 have been spent to where we are today, if that's correct, if I've heard everything right. And not a lick of money has gone into the environmental impacts yet?
That's correct. That's part of the design process.
I understand. It doesn't have to always be, it can happen beforehand, for sure. I think that moving forward with this, whichever route that you take, you're going to run into some significant environmental impacts. I think there needs to be an understanding that the town of Simsbury has a regional responsibility for the conservation of a select few amphibian species within this corridor that only occur in the Connecticut River Valley and extensively within the Farmington River Valley. Multiple breeding populations of this species will be impacted by the alignments as they are suggested here tonight. I had a few more things to say. I think I'll leave it at that because there's a lot of people that still want to talk. But I would like to see some significant coordination with this Connecticut Department of Transportation, with the Connecticut Deep. And I think that when we're talking about the NDDB and getting our state permits for a lot of these projects, we should be cautious about saying that that's jumping through hoops. It's not jumping through hoops. It's maintaining what we need to be doing to protect the environment. And we talk about the value of this rail to trail system for this town. There's a lot of value in the ecology in this town, the habitats that occur in this town. And I think rail trails do have their place, and I've heard a lot of positive things about them, but I would like to hear a few, and this is the one thing I would like for you guys to answer for me tonight, a few of the negative things that can be associated with these trails when they come into small towns. I know of rail trails in Hamden where there's been increases rates of crime against public, things like that. Things like that need to be thought about. So if you can maybe talk a little bit about that and some of those statistics, that would be great. Thank you.
Yep, we'll get there. So I don't think, Mark, I don't think you're representing our police force tonight. I understand Hamden is a very different community than Simsbury. I also think, as we do have our members of our Board of Selectmen, I think Simsbury has always done its best to protect the environment in terms of preserving open space.
Can I make one more comment?
We're not having a debate on this right now.
I just would like an apology from you to say that Hamden is not the same community as Simsbury. I think that's really not an appropriate thing to say. I'm originally from Hamden.
Okay, I used to live in Hamden. Okay, I'm sorry if I offended you, sir.
Communities are communities.
Yes, yes.
Crime is everywhere.
Certainly possible, yes.
Diversity can be everywhere, but it's not.
Okay. Steve?
So, many of you know me. I'm the guy that's always got many hats on, Stephen Mitchell, and I was on the board of directors for East Coast Greenway, and I have been to not as many meetings as Bruce Donald, but I've ridden my bicycle across the country. I've ridden my bicycle from Canada to Key West. And I'd like to have a little bit of a lighter moment right now. Because Mr. Bruce Donald, about a year ago, was talking to the Simsbury Library at the Chamber of Commerce meeting, and he was mentioning about this gentleman that was going to start out in Key West on April 16th. Yep. And he was going to run, not bicycle, he was going to run from Key West to Canada. And I went, nah. My wife, as you know, Susan Fitzgerald, now Susan Mitchell, is from Fitzgerald's, but she likes to have her birthday down in Florida. So we went down to Vero Beach, and the two people right here, Josh and Shan. Josh was the support. She was the slacker on the bicycle. She took a bicycle with a trailer with all their stuff. And this gentleman right here ran from Key West, Florida to Canada in 78 days. Right through here, Simsbury. I treated them to lunch at the Cracker Barrel. And as a matter of fact, when they started out, they were boyfriend, girlfriend. And you know what? I think it might have been at the Cracker Barrel. Shan had this idea. Because they were making their way to Canada, and right before they got to the Canadian border, this guy right here, he got about, how far from the Canadian border were you exactly? A few feet from the Canadian border. He gets down on his knee and asks this beautiful lady, what did you ask her?
I said, would you marry me?
Simple stuff, yes! I got the privilege of going to their wedding. So anyway, I just wanted to lighten up the atmosphere a little bit, and certainly, go ahead. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, we did a 3,000-mile ride last year along the East Coast Greenway, and we did it just to see if we could. But we also did it as a fundraiser and to raise awareness for the East Coast Greenway Alliance, the small nonprofit that supports the Greenway, because we wanted to encourage people to get out and be active, and just get the idea out there of how good these greenways can be for communities, both connecting people. And we also were pointing out the fact that it's a 3,000-mile trail. About 1,000 miles of it is complete, but 2,000 miles of it isn't. So a lot of it was fairly sketchy for us to be out on roads where there's no protection, there's cars running right by it. So we'd love to see it completed, for just the sake of people being able to get from one community to another and being healthy and supporting property values in many times too. So from what we've seen, it's been almost all good when you can have something like this in your backyard. We've talked about where we're going to go next. We live here in Connecticut in Southbury, and we always want to look at a place that's close to a trail because we want to go on places by foot and by bike. I hate having to drive.
So he says that to a car dealer. So anyway, there's a couple things that I wanted to address, and I'll stay in my own camera focus here. So the couple things that I wanted to address, one was about parking. One thing that we have here in Simsbury that is very unique to towns along the East Coast Greenway is we have something called Iron Horse Boulevard. Exactly how many parking spaces are there on Iron Horse Boulevard?
The technical answer is a lot.
Okay, it's 500 parking spaces. So if you go to Cheshire, you go to Southington, you go to so many of these communities, Hamden, along the trail, there's no place to park. So really, parking does become an issue. The other thing that I wanted to mention was that crime is, as somebody said this, crime is everywhere. You're never going to prevent that. But the more open these greenways are, the safer they are. The other thing that I would like to point out is, as a board member of the East Coast Greenway, I've been to 22 meetings from Maine to Florida. And during some of those meetings where the East Coast Greenway was not exactly defined, we had communities, municipalities that would come up to us at board meetings saying, please consider bringing the Greenway through our town. Because everybody knows that there's one thing that every cyclist, and there's a few nut jobs out there that run, that come through the town on the East Coast Greenway, they all have one of these. And that's an economic driver. But the biggest benefit is to everyone in this room, because I'm going to tell you something that hasn't been addressed tonight. In Tariffville, the only way you can get to Simsbury proper, the library, to shopping, to the police department, to the schools, the only way you can do that safely right now, and I've had this conversation with the Simsbury police, is to get in a car or get on a school bus and drive. You cannot go to you don't even have a post office anymore. Sorry, in order for you to go to the Simsbury post office, you need to get in a car and drive safely. This will change the whole concept of Tariffville. Having a greenway, however it's designed, I kind of like option 2. Well, I kind of like option, Nord, where's Nord Christensen? Hey, so I got this weird call from this guy back here a couple weeks ago. Hey, Steve, I think I found it. Nord, what'd you find? The original railroad bed that went across from Big Y, and it goes right to the river. And we walked it, didn't we, a couple weeks ago? And so it was pretty amazing. Not a bad option, wouldn't affect a lot of homes. And if you want to, just for the last point, the bridge that would potentially go over the river, if you've seen the bridges that go over 384, over in Manchester, those new bridges that have been put in place, they come 100-foot sections, the big long sections that get put in place. And so it really would probably have very little environmental impact.
We already have the piers, but June is next. She's been patiently waiting.
Thank you so much. My name is June. I live in Simsbury for about 40 years. And believe me, there's nothing I would rather see than, improvements to our town. And I get where everybody's coming from. But I live in Wood Duck, and I just recently moved there. And my backyard, too, goes out a little bit, then falls down to the river. I don't see any way possible that you can build anything right behind all of our homes. Besides the wildlife that I see there, that I actually have pictures of, eagles, bobcats, turkeys, bears, everything. If you did build a walkway behind there, and if it looked beautiful and everything was great, what's going to stop people from coming in from other areas that decide they want to go fishing there now? We had that same problem when you look where the big tree is, that people now go down there, and a lot of people coming in from different areas and messing the whole area up, leaving garbage all over the place because they want to get into the river because it's hot out. And then, our town gets left with all the garbage to pick up. So there has to be a different way to do this besides going through. If you're going to do an evaluation and you haven't seen the property yet, I suggest that you do it when all of us residents are there, so we can show you. I cannot conceive that you're going to build. It goes right down to the river. I don't know how you're going to do this. I'm going to walk out my door to here, and then there's going to be a bike path. Now.
And I'm out further than you.
Oh.
I'm out another 6 feet from you.
And I agree, it's great for children. I have grandchildren in this town. Believe me, I don't want to see, anything against children from enjoying stuff, but we also have to understand this does impact all of us here. I mean, it's really very close. It's very tight back there, and I'm for it, but in a different way. And if you have to spend a little bit more money of building a bridge over the river or something like that, then so be it. Because if you have the funds, then hopefully you'll use them for that. Yeah. Thank you.
We got Dave Richmond all fired up back here. All right, we'll one more from this table, then we'll go back up there to balance it out a little bit.
Hello, I'm another Wood Duck resident, and I am Steve knows, I support the trail. I support all of this. I had no idea this was going to be literally I could spit on somebody and hit them on a bike from our deck which we all enjoy. At night, you sit out there, do we really want all types of skateboarders? It's not just bikes. And there's noise and there's dogs because we walk our dogs on the trail all the time. What about the land west of us over the river that's just open? Why can't you build a bridge over the river and then put the boardwalk in all that land that sits there and it's not wetlands? Because I look at it all the time. It's the big field. There's no trees and it's wide open. But I don't think, if anybody wants to buy our condos, they're going to go on the market next week.
All right. So we'll call that option 2A that Mark will look at, getting across the river with a different bridge onto the other land. But I think there may be some ownership issues over that way. Is that correct?
Hello, everybody. So I'm usually sitting in the back or in the front, not saying much. So my name is Chris Squires. I'm one of the regional bicycle advocates in the region. And I've been a bicycle advocate for 35 years in this region, working on every single bicycle project, multi-use trail in the region. I'm also one of the founding board members of the East Coast Greenway Alliance. So let me reiterate what Bruce said before. This project is one of the biggest projects in the world. In the last 100 years, other countries are mimicking this project. There's going to be all kinds of people showing up to put economic development into this town, and money will go into it. By the hundreds, by the thousands. If you go on the East Bay Bike Trail out in Rhode Island, they spend millions of dollars every year. People coming in from all over New England. So alternative 2, to me, is the easiest one to get to. And that's the most simplest. We drop in 2 bridges. It can be done like we did in eastern Connecticut, in Bolton and in Manchester, and it gets done. And it's very little impact to the environment at all. So I support alternative 2.
Still going to be 90 condos.
Right.
You're not taking respect to residents that
Okay, Bob.
Yes, I'm Bob Dickinson. I hope everybody will boo me when I get finished. But one of the things you have to face is there's an alternative. When you can come through Willimantic, there's a connection with the airline trail going south. The trail's finished. It would have to be paved, maybe not. Stone dust now. It goes into Portland, and there's now I don't know if it's beyond the study, but to take the trail through Middletown and connect to the north-south trail there. And then guess what? Simsbury will be out of it.
Okay, that's a sad option. Sherry?
I guess I'm another 40-year resident of Tariffville and president of the Village Association this year. I'm a realtor for almost 4 decades. And in the last 3 weeks alone, I've had 4 clients from other parts of the country. And even today, I showed houses in Farmington, Avon, and East Granby. My client that I was with this morning is military, a retired Air Force helicopter pilot. And every single house that we went to, she was looking for how close it was to the trail. So we were in Stony Corners in Avon. One of the houses backs to the trail. It was very exciting to her. She's a runner. Farmington, there were 2 houses several weeks ago. We were close to the trail. I had people coming in from Wisconsin, California, all over, and they want the walkability and the connectivity to things in the area. Now, I care about the environment and the impact on it. I can't believe Tariffville is the only place on the East Coast Greenway or the Heritage Trails that we want to be close to the river. So I'm sure there are some people that are experts that would help us determine how to not impact or destroy nature. But the river is meant to be engaged with. It's meant for us for transportation, for recreation, for beauty. And I mean, I wish if there was a wider shoulder. We have no shoulder on 315. I live on Elm Street. I'd be thrilled if I could walk out my door and safely get on a path and take a really nice walk with my dog or my friends and not be on the main road or worry about the traffic. But I think some of us here are a little short-sighted, perhaps. Don't be angry at me or throw stones, but I really believe, I'm not saying we should have the trail on your deck. And I also, there's 120 houses, but I don't think it would go behind 120 houses. So I'm just saying, maybe be open-minded, let people come to different designs, and it has increased property values in so many neighborhoods. So just maybe be a little open-minded. Anyway.
All right, thank you, Sherry. Okay, we go back. Oh, look, back again. Hang on, we're coming back. How you doing?
Thank you.
You bet.
Hi, my name's Bill. I too am an owner at Governor's Bridge, happen to be the current president of the association. So let me see if I can straighten a few facts out. There's 120 units or owners. I don't know what the total population of those 120 are, sorry. But I'm sure there's at least a minimum of 2 to sometimes 5 people per household. There's a lot of people in the community. One of these routes takes 2 roads, Whitewater and Wood Duck. They travel through the heart of the community, the southernmost point to the northernmost point. Every driveway, every private circle in the community has to be used. They have to use one of those roads to exit the community. There'll be a lot of traffic on there. So that's one of the considerations I think that you need to bring into play here. I have not heard anything through all of the discussion about environmental studies, what the residential study and impact would be. I'm sure you must do those. I have been to a couple of rail to trail projects that actually, for short durations, gone through some communities. And it's not a pleasant situation to actually ride a bike through, I found, personal experience. And it's also not always the greatest to walk. That's my own personal experience. So I think you need to think about that as well. I also find it fairly odd that in all of the discussion of the walkarounds and the research that you've done, that I haven't heard yet where anybody has tried to contact the association to be present on any of these walkthroughs. I think that's an important step if you're going to say, we want to bring a project right down the heart of your community, and we're walking that you wouldn't reach out to us. So I find that very odd. I'll bring that message back. I'll bring that message back to them, and if you need, you bring it right to me. Well, I wasn't there a year ago. I wasn't the president a year ago. Sorry.
It was a whole different administration? Is that what you're saying?
It was. Funny how that works.
It is.
I think there's, well, I think we can leave it at that. I would like to see those things happen. I'd like to see, one last thing is all of these are available on your website, these detailed charts to take a look at the detail reviews.
Yeah, I believe the PowerPoint and tonight's presentation will be on the town website and on the project website.
Because it'd be good to actually be able to view them in detail. I'll leave it with that, but I think some 30+% of this gathering is from the community, and I think they brought up some really valid points.
Well, thank you. Well, we're going to stay in the back for a minute. What I would say, and again, this is still early in this project in terms of coming up with actual alignments, but one of the things perhaps we can throw out is when we get closer and have more information, do we do a group walk? On a nice day?
Rain or shine.
Rain or shine. Oh, you guys are tough.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I was lucky enough to grow up in Simsbury and come to this school for 6 years in elementary school. And I just wanted to say I'm really excited about this project. one of the best parts about growing up in Simsbury for me was the ability to take the Farmington Valley Rail Trail right downtown, go to Jay Foster's, fortunately not there, and just have a good time in the summer with my friends. And I really look forward to seeing what this project can do for Tariffville. Having said all of that, I really echoed the concerns of folks in Wood Duck. I strongly encourage everybody to do a walkthrough as this project progresses, and I'm sure that there is a way to move this project along while being sensitive to residential concerns and making sure that property values, the environment is protected. But I'll also say this, one of the best things we can do for the environment is setting up more trails like this so people can rely a little less on their cars and maybe bike or walk to the nearest grocery store. And I think that's going to happen a little easier with the completion of this Greenway. So thank you guys so much for all of your work that you've done on this.
Did you have a question?
Mary Larson, I live in Governor's Bridge also, and I want to reiterate what a lot of people have expressed their concern about it coming through Whitewater and Wood Duck. I moved into that community I've moved out into the Farmington Valley I spent 35 years living in Hartford, and it was wonderful to come out here. But I want to just, I think that you need to think, in order to gain access to these things, which everybody should have access to. I worked with inner city children my whole career, and everyone should have access to the environment. But be careful you're not destroying what it is you want access to. It will change it. Things change, it will change it, and it will change my community. And I'm against that personally, of it coming to Governor's Bridge. Another concern I have is the two of the models talk about it coming directly to Tariffville School, and I know there's a lot of good reasons for good benefits from that. As a teacher, I know that. However, in light of the problems that we're experiencing in our schools nationwide these days, I would have concern about an access point to a school through which anybody can come that is not coming straight through our town and knows that the school is there. And I don't mean to sound like an alarmist or anything, but I am with children every day, and we practice those drills, and kids are scared. Kindergarten kids are crying. And I just feel like today I just was sitting here thinking I'm not a very good speaker, despite the fact that I'm a teacher. And I have to speak for the kids, and not just for their education, but primarily for their safety, which is in the news these days. And I do think that it would present a big safety hazard to have an access to a school through which you don't know the people that are coming. Anybody coming down that trail could have access to that school, and I think that's an important concern to keep in mind.
Well, thank you, and thank you for watching out for our children. It's really important what you do. Sally?
I think I'll take this down. I just wanted to add a little bit of information that I think a lot of people have lost track of over the years for good reason. I'm the Simsbury representative to the Lower Farmington River Wild and Scenic Study Committee. And I don't know if everybody remembers that our river in town is designated wild and scenic. And it's designated wild and scenic because it has certain very special resource values. And those are, we say, geology, water quality, biological diversity is important, cultural landscape, which refers to the history, like the history of the mill in Tariffville and the history of Native Americans along the river, and then also recreation. So as one of our values with recreation, we do care about the trail as a recreational asset. However, everything is going to need to be balanced, and the Wild and Scenic Committee has no opinion, yes or no, on any particular route. But my point is that our obligation is to consider the value of those special things. And I want to give you the reminder that for everybody who's doing the consulting work and involved in the planning, that because of this extra layer of protection, if there is a project that's in the river corridor or on the bed and banks of the river itself, and federal funding is involved, then the National Park Service needs to be involved in ascertaining that what's being done is not going to be damaging to the special values. And in particular, you know, if you have an Army Corps of Engineer permit because you're working on the bed and banks of the river, that in particular would require a very intensive review because the standards are higher on a wild and scenic river. In order to preserve the values that make the river a real treasure for our community, it's a thing that everybody wants to protect. And sometimes there are things you can't do because you need to protect those values.
Anything you want to respond to on that, Mark, in terms of process? Okay. I know it's getting late, but we're trying to get through to everybody. Deep back row again. Hang on. Going all the way back again.
Thank you. Hi, Rick Waters. Live on Terry's Plain. Happen to have the river in our backyard and absolutely love it. I want to echo what Sally just said about the river. This is a tremendous spot. I'm just in our town, kayaked 1,400 miles last year. So as much time as you're on a bike, I'm in my kayak. I spent a lot of time in Pickerel Cove. I spent a lot of time in the Oxbow. These are probably two of the most sensitive areas on the entire river. They are tremendously valuable to them. If we can't stay away from sort of the Floydville Road route, which would be my personal preference, I'd love to go across the bridge down Floydville Road and make the connection, then that, you know, following that, putting a new bridge in and following, I guess it was alternative 2, feels like the best bet that would be going there. It keeps us away from the Oxbow. It provides the access. And I just want to make one more point about access, because I've heard in several meetings, we've got to provide more access. We have a ton of access to the river in Simsbury. We've got trails that run along the river. We've got access points for kayaks and canoes. We've got points for picnicking. We've got all kinds of things. Why don't we invest a little more in that? Tariffville Park is a great resource. And when I hear about kids getting to the river, well, hell, folks, it's just down the road. I mean, the river's a tremendous resource. Our town has tremendous properties. If we just continue to invest in them and find the right connection that balances property rights and environmental rights, because that's really what it is, then I think we can get there. Because we all want the connection, but let's also be a little realistic. How many folks are going to walk the 2.5 or 3 miles, even if it's a nice trail, to go get your groceries or to go to the police station or go to the post office? Bike maybe, but I don't think a lot of people are going to make that walk. So let's just make sure we're following the balance. And my last point, I promise, is one about sort of what you're looking at along the way. You know, Sally mentioned the point about needing to go to the Wild and Scenic, needing to go to the National Park Service. Absolutely. But do it early, because one of the things that I've found as these projects move through the town is each little agency answers the mail on its little part. So if something goes to inland wetlands, they say, our scope is only this big. But somebody's got to look out for the common sense of the whole project, and that needs to happen early. So please engage with the residents. The comment about, and I appreciate you tried to reach out, but make sure it happens, because these are the folks that are going to be most affected. Thanks.
Hi. Full disclosure, I don't live in Simsbury.
Never have lived in Simsbury. I am a board member of the Farmington Valley Trails Council. I'm an avid user of the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail, the Farmington River Trail. So, first of all, I'd like to say, certainly don't want to wade into what things are going on in the community. I don't know enough about the geography and all that. I think a lot of good issues have been raised here. So I'm certainly not just telling people, get lost and get out of the way. I would like to dispel some of what I think are misconceptions, though, of negativity that came out. One of them was about crime. There's absolutely no evidence, first of all, I think, that any rail trails anywhere have increased crime. Do crimes occur on them occasionally? Of course, because they occur anywhere. Actually, the best access for people to commit crimes is this wonderful road system we have. And people can drive cars and trucks on them, much better ways to burglarize. So I think crime should not be considered. I heard people talking about noise and things like that. One advantage we have here is that this is not like a new project, a new thing that's never been seen before in Connecticut. We have this whole trail system, and a lot of it goes right by residential areas. I mean, the Farmington River Trail goes right through residential areas. I'm curious if those people are experiencing lots of noise or invasion of their privacy. I mean, it's not been my experience any of the times I've been on the trail. Possibly kids do stuff at night, I don't know. So again, yes, there are things to be concerned about, but I think they're addressable. I don't really know. I mean, all of the alternatives seem to have some drawback to them. It just seems to me that we should try to do the one that can be most easily done quickly, because unfortunately, like Bruce was saying, there's lots of money floating around and it's not going to last forever. And these projects have a tendency to get stalled out when there's too many obstacles to them. So if coming along, I mean, I would love to come along the river. Trails along the river are beautiful, but if that doesn't work, see what you can do. If you have to build a couple of bridges, I think if we can get the money to do it, spend the extra money and just get it done. That would be my input. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We'll come back to you.
Hi, there was just a comment about who's going to walk down to get groceries, and I would just have everyone think about the activity that's on the trails today and what is going to be 10, 20 years from now with the battery density, the lithium-ion batteries, et cetera, and the new e-bikes that people are developing and are increasingly being used on the trails. So I think one is you got to think forward as to what that trail activity will be in the future. The second is, again, thinking 20 years from now, you're on the trail and you're thinking, why in the world did they try to shoehorn this thing in between this community and this river when they could have built a bridge? So you're going from Key West to Maine. Take a little extra money, a little extra time, and just try not to shoehorn this thing in, and just, my view was build the bridge. And again, thinking 20 years from now, the traffic that'll be on these trails, the usage that are going to be on these trails is different than we imagine today.
I'm seeing shirts being made. Build a bridge.
Hi, my name is Nord Christensen. I've lived in town almost 70 years. I own a property right through the cut in the fence there. Couple of comments to begin with. This is my first meeting. Never been to one of these before. Stephen asked me to get involved, so here I am. Few comments. One is when I was 10, 12 years old, used to hop on my bicycle, ride from West Simsbury to where Sunrise Convenience Store is to get an ice cream. Didn't think twice about it. Hop on my bicycle, ride to West Hartford over the mountain to go buy stereo equipment at Radio Shack right in downtown West Hartford. Never gave it a second thought. The traffic today is horrendous everywhere. I wouldn't begin to ride a bicycle. The trail's needed. It gets a ton of use. I understand your concerns. Like I said, I haven't been involved with this up until now, but I listened to Hazel Meadow fight tooth and nail to keep it from going through their neighborhood. I sat in a meeting the other night, a zoning meeting, and listened to them say, we've got to protect the trail. It's the best thing in the world. They fought it tooth and nail 10 years ago. Now they love it, absolutely love it. But I still I hear your concerns, I understand. But look at the transition there. I walked that section of trail with Stephen, I don't know, a month ago, 6 weeks ago. I'm sure some of it's on private property, but we did it anyway. That rail bed is blow the leaves off, the bulk of it for about a half a mile is blow the leaves off of it and pave it. I don't know how you get from that last little section around your neighborhood. We couldn't get there because the water was too high. I wasn't going to go stomping around in knee-deep water with bad knees. But it seems to me there ought to be a way to do that without impacting you and following the old rail bed. It just, to me, is a no-brainer. Regarding the environmental impacts, I was at a friend's house the other night, and he stood up and he shook like this and he went, that's the earth 10,000 years from now when it says, God, I'm glad those people are gone. We are an impact, no matter how much we recycle, how much we're an impact. 100 years ago, that rail bed was put in with zero consideration for what they dumped in the wetlands there to attain it. We can do much better than that today, but we can do it. It can be done thoughtfully. Yes, is it going to change? Absolutely it's going to change, but it doesn't need to totally destroy it. I think the benefits overall will outweigh the negative impact if we do it wisely with thought. One final comment. I'm a fat old guy. I don't ride a bike. I walk. The other thing I do is I long distance motorcycle ride. I have ridden from Canada to Key West. I have ridden from Connecticut to Prudhoe Bay, Alaska, up with my wife on the back. I went out of my way to stay off the interstates, away from the major routes, find the river roads. They're beautiful. I ride with a group of guys. Most of them are retired. I'm not yet. We go up northwestern Connecticut and up into Massachusetts, up towards Vermont. We find all the little tiny back roads, all the river roads. They're gorgeous. This section that Stephen and I walked the other day is absolutely beautiful. I'll leave you with that.
All right, thank you. Okay. Oh, wait, you've already gone though, right? I know, but in fairness, there's some people who still haven't. So let's get through everybody first. Okay, we got about 10, 15 minutes of the regular meeting, and then we can stand around and hang out afterwards if need be.
Okay, I'm also a resident of Governor Bridge. I've lived there over 20 years. I live on Whitewater, right where Whitewater and Wood Duck merge. Alternative 3 or 3A totally devalues my property. 3A is the one that goes right along Whitewater. Right, so that means you cut out my entire front yard, which is narrow, and I walk out my front door onto the bike trail. If you do it in the back thing, my backyard is only like 5 feet deep. I'm on the bike trail. It's a very quiet residential neighborhood, and that was one of the things I liked about it. There's no through traffic because if you don't live there, there's no reason to be there. So you're destroying our house values have remained steady because it's a well-maintained community that doesn't have a lot of traffic and trash and stuff like that. With the bike trail cutting off, I think you're like overlooking the whole, I think you've discounted the residents of Governor's Bridge and what it's going to do to their livelihoods. And if you're going to build it there, are you going to buy all our condos? Because our value, if you put it where you're going to put it, my house is has no value whatsoever after that. So that's a big concern of mine.
All right, thank you. Do we have up here? Then I'll come back for you, Don. How are we doing, Ferg? Okay.
I think we've got this thing licked tonight as a group. The one area that seems to be a concern is Governor's Bridge. Little point of clarification, where it says Tariffville Elementary School, that property, I'm not talking about the school, I'm talking about where that property is. Is that owned by the town?
Yeah.
It is. What would, I didn't realize we had so many funds available so we could build bridges like whenever we want to. So what would stop taking alternative 2 and keeping it on the west side of the river and crossing over into Tariffville Park north of Governor's Bridge? Not all the way up. Even a little lower than that. If you can get above Governor's Bridge. Was that alternative discussed and thrown out for any reason?
Look at that. Mark's had it easy for like the last half hour.
I know. Appreciate the microphone again. Thank you. The answer is no. That wasn't a new crossing up north was not considered, but we can certainly look at that.
I mean, crossing over where the old bridge would be kind of nice, but under the circumstances, if we could resolve all these problems with Governor's Bridge just by going a little further north and crossing. That
Where the bridge used to be. Mark, do you want to talk about the original abutment?
One sec, Steve.
Mark, do you want to talk about the difference between using the existing abutment versus a brand new structure on the river?
Yeah. So the primary reason when we do these types of evaluations that we shy away from any new crossing is permitting mostly, because permitting a structure where a previous structure already was located is much, I'm not going to say easy, but easier than trying to go and impact fresh wetlands that have been unimpacted. So it's not, again, impossible, but it's new construction in a new location is a little bit more difficult to permit.
And they know about the floodway and the floodplain.
Yep, floodway and floodplain. And I just want to make a general comment too that, and I appreciate I'm forgetting your name, the herpetologist, Dennis. I appreciated the comment about the hoops because there are so many agencies involved for anything to get from planning to construction that care deeply about the environment. And one thing I'll share with you is in my previous life, I spent a decade working for the National Park Service. And I have an undergraduate degree in forestry and wildlife resources and a master's in parks, recreation, and tourism management. So I like to think that I can appreciate all the comments here. The benefit that I have of being here is I can play Switzerland. I'm just collecting comments, and everything you said has been valuable to me in this process, so I appreciate it. But people do care deeply in all the agencies, and people you'll never see. The people at DEEP who do the NDDB stuff, the Army Corps, the Federal Highway Administration, all those folks who have to sign off on all this at some point along the way do care deeply. So the Wild and Scenic, I thank you for mentioning it. But these are all important comments, and I appreciate them all.
Okay, we're in the home stretch.
Hi, I'm John Nagy. I've lived in Tariffville for 50 years, Simsbury for my whole life. Greatest thing that ever happened to Simsbury is the multi-use trail. I love that trail. I'm on it all the time. The thing that I most want is a way to get from Tariffville, I live in Tariffville, a way to get from Tariffville to Simsbury without getting in a car. That's all I want. I don't care which way we go. I don't want to go to East Granby, I'm sorry. I don't want to have to go to East Granby to get to Simsbury. But, any way that I could get to Simsbury, either walking or on a bicycle, I would go. And I've been waiting 50 years for this moment. So I applaud you all.
Yeah, quick one. You had a slide where you talked about Talcott Mountain State Park and going through there and the difficulty getting down to 100 feet. We have a lot of money, evidently. Build a bridge from the top of that mountain down into Curtis Park parking lot, and then up on the top of Talcott Mountain, you've got Laurel, what's that, Laurel Tower Hill, Laurel Hill. And when I bike through Tariffville, I go up Mountain Ave and I stop on that hill, on that old road there, the Tariffville Road, because it's beautiful. You can see for miles. You want a feature? Somebody over there mentioned a feature. You want a feature? Put an ice cream store up there and a tower, and you got people you're going to see 15 miles. It's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous.
All right, one more vote for features. Put it down. All right, who has not asked a question yet tonight? Anyone left? All right, coming back to you.
Hi. If you go up Mountain Road and you're at the end, you're at Bloomfield, actually. You're not actually in Simsbury at that point. Before you go over the old road bed. So I'm from Bloomfield, and I want to make a couple of comments, then just ask a question. Two comments. One, the whole issue of environmental impacts and when we look at them. The other thing I think that hasn't been mentioned about the permitting process and the various agencies, projects take on a life of their own. And there is a human tendency, once 3 steps are done, people don't like to go back to the beginning. So I think it's very important that a lot of the environmental concerns, because frankly, I feel for the residents, I hear what they're saying about their condo and their neighborhood, but I also just don't think routes 3A and 3A are probably environmentally possible along the edge of the river. I think that's important to determine that early, not late. So I think several people have made that comment. I'd also like to make a quick comment about, I think it's the first selectman's comment about going through Tariffville as opposed, the trail connecting to the current trail through Simsbury as opposed to going up to, I guess you hit East Granby in Floydville and then get to Granby, back to get Lake Basil if you came in behind the, to the parking there. I'm a bike rider. I ride all these trails, and especially the Farmington Canal Trail and the Farmington Heritage Trail. I don't think that matters a lot. You stop at various places. Like I stopped in Collinsville, even though the trail goes outside of Collinsville. So I think that the routes are important. Like a lot of people, I think the Floydville route has probably been abandoned too early. So my question to you is, you start off, I think, very quickly going through some abandoned routes. We've talked about the others. We've had a new route added. At this point, are you willing to go back and look at some of these other routes again, especially the Floydville route?
Let me see if I can help you, and I know that we're kind of running up on our time. Couple things. The whole point in this is we are very early in the process. I would say at this point, Mark, you can just nod because I am tired of running all the way up there with the microphone. Nothing's off the table. That wasn't a nod, Mark. It wasn't a nod. We rehearsed this for hours today. Okay. We've heard that there's significant concerns for the people who live in along those neighborhoods that would be impacted. Fair? Okay. The website is a place where we can still put comments down for how long?
The website will be open through the end of the study, so years. So please.
Less than years, because we want to get this built, because somebody's been waiting 50 years to get to Simsbury.
I'd like to have them within 2 weeks.
Okay. So we're going to have information up on the town website on how to get to this project website and give your comments. This entire presentation is going to be up on the town website probably by noontime tomorrow. Right, Adam? Bringing Adam in? Okay. Anyone else who has not asked a question? Don, bring it home for me, Don.
Oh, well, just a comment. So many years on the Conservation Commissions had been sensitive to river issues. And I take the points that have been made about the fact that most of the environmental study which will be needed has not occurred and is yet to be discovered. What's clear to me is that pretty much everybody in the river business understands that the health of a river is dependent upon the vegetative buffer along the river. If you don't have the vegetation, a good slosh of vegetation to filter the water, your river is in trouble. And the same is equally true of the wetlands along the river. Anytime you put a 8-foot wide corridor of impacted land through that vegetative buffer, you're minimizing the contribution that it's able to make. And worse yet, if you were to consider paving it. The river is in danger from that sort of construction within the vegetative buffer. There's already too many places along the river where the road is quite too close and there's not much protection. So I'd leave you with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, I thought we were home. We got one more all the way in the back. Legs getting cramping up and getting tired.
This is a brand new question. I've been a 30-year resident of Tariffville. I love biking, nature, and kayaking, so I'm excited about the trail being here. My question is the current construction. Where do you expect those bikers to go once they get to 315? And are you going to do something about that intersection? Because I'm thinking about the safety of bikers. And Sharon is very brave. I would never ride on 315 anymore.
Oh, I think you know what, Mark, you've had a tough night. I think we got someone else to pick on tonight in terms of where our current project is going to end. What's that going to look like? Where are the people going to go and spend their money? Go ahead, Adam.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so we run up 315 to Main Street, and it ends in a little kind of walled off area with a couple bike racks as kind of a temporary, terminus to that trail. I think we talked earlier about how it's been about 13 years in the making, and that section is part of that 13 years, as well as our section to Curtis Park. So the thought of where to end that trail included the idea of extending it past there and understanding that it's going to be a while till we get there. So the intersection with the light that everybody loves to sit at does get a little improvements through this project as well. And I think DOT is supposed to improve that section, that signal itself as well in the future. So all of that has been incorporated into that section itself. And it's kind of part of the reason why it took so long to get there, knowing that intersection was an issue.
All right, with that, I appreciate the fact there have been a lot of different opinions tonight. Everybody has been very respectful. Certainly appreciate everybody coming out. If you haven't done so, you can put your name on the sign-up sheet over there with Caitlin. And other than that, just want to thank you all for coming out tonight.